The morning I realized my neighbor had quietly stolen 10 feet of my backyard, I was barefoot, half asleep, dragging a trash bin to the curb, and I almost thanked him for the new fence before I understood it was built on my land. Yeah, that's how polite I used to be. For a few days, I actually convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. You know what I mean? Fresh cedar boards, 6 feet tall, clean lines like something off a home improvement show, still glowing pale gold in the Tennessee sun. It even smelled good. Cut lumber and weekend ambition. It hadn't been there Friday. I'd been out of town visiting my sister in Tulsa. By Monday morning, someone had redrawn the back edge of my life. I lived just outside Franklin, Tennessee. Not gated, not flashy, just one of those subdivisions where people wave but don't necessarily talk. Backyards kind of blur into each other, separated more by assumption than fencing. When I bought my place 8 years ago, there was no barrier behind it, just grass rolling back toward a loose cluster of maples and scrub oaks. The property line was technically somewhere back there, but nobody obsessed over it. It felt communal, in a quiet, unspoken way. The house behind mine sold about a year before this happened. Guy named Brent Hollis moved in, early 40s, commercial real estate, drove a lifted truck that never quite fit in his driveway. He wasn't unfriendly, just polished. The kind of guy who drops phrases like property values into casual conversation at block parties. He had that billboard energy, always selling, even when he didn't need to. So when I first saw the fence, I figured he wanted privacy. Fair enough. People put up fences all the time. I didn't think twice, until Wednesday afternoon when Miguel, my lawn guy, shut off his mower and waved me over. You know your yard goes past that fence, right? I laughed. Pretty sure it ends around those trees. Miguel shook his head slowly. I've been cutting your grass 3 years. I always thought it went deeper. Like 10 feet deeper. Miguel isn't dramatic. He notices sprinkler heads, uneven soil, the subtle shade change in grass where underground lines run. If he says something's off, it sticks. That night I dug through the old folder from closing, survey, plot map, warranty deed, paperwork I hadn't touched since signing day. I spread it across my kitchen table and stared at the tiny printed measurements. And there it was. My lot didn't stop at the trees. It extended 10 feet past them. 10 feet past that brand new cedar fence. I remember leaning back in my chair, just staring at the paper. No lightning bolt moment. Just a quiet shift in my chest. Either I was misreading the survey, or my neighbor had built a fence 8 to 10 feet onto my property. Now, I'm not confrontational. I don't look for fights. So the next evening, I walked over calm, friendly, survey folded under my arm. Brent was in his driveway wiping down his truck. "Hey," I said, holding up the paper. "Quick question about the fence." He smiled. "Looks good, right?" "It does." I was looking at my survey, though, and it seems like my lot might go a bit past where the fence is. He didn't stiffen. Didn't frown. Just nodded slowly. Previous owner told me the line was around there. Near the trees. Yeah, that's what I always assumed too. Maybe we should double check. Just to be safe. He shrugged. "Sure, man. Whatever you need. Easy. Casual. No tensión." And then nothing happened. 2 weeks passed. Fence stayed exactly where it was. No markers, no follow-up. I told myself he was busy. Then the shed showed up. Flatbed truck on a Saturday morning. Prefab panels, dark gray siding, small window. Not a cute little garden box either. This was a serious structure. Crew of 3 assembling it like they were building a guest house. By Sunday afternoon it stood on a gravel base with a poured concrete pad. Monday, an electrician ran conduit underground from Brent's house. I stood at my kitchen window watching it take shape, and that quiet shift inside my chest got heavier. By Tuesday evening the shed had permanent lighting installed. And eyeballing the fence line against the trees, I could tell at least half of it sat beyond where my survey said Brent's land ended. That's when it stopped feeling like confusion and started feeling intentional. But I didn't explode. I didn't threaten. I didn't post on the neighborhood Facebook page. I ordered a professional survey. $980. Not cheap, but cheaper than letting someone quietly redraw my property. The surveyor came out with his tripod and transit, moving across the yard like a chess player thinking 5 moves ahead. A few hours later, he drove bright orange stakes into the ground and tied fluorescent tape around them, so they fluttered in the wind. We walked the line together. Fence, 8 feet onto my land. Shed, just over 5 feet onto my land. There's something different about seeing proof. Suspicion leaves room for doubt. Flags in the ground don't. I took photos. Every angle. Every measurement. That evening I walked the survey over to Brent's house. He opened the door halfway, like he already knew. Got the survey done, I said. Looks like the fence and part of the shed are on my property. He scanned it. Jaw tightened for a split second before the smile returned. Surveys can be off. This one's certified. Silence. We can fix it now, I said, before it gets expensive. He nodded slowly. Let me look into it. I left uneasy but still hopeful. Instead of moving anything, Brent moved his patio chairs. That's what got me. Not the lumber. Not the concrete. The chairs. One Saturday morning, I looked out my back window, and there they were. 2 Adirondack chairs and a little fire pit planted squarely between the orange survey flags like they were decorations. Like the markers were suggestions. That wasn't confusion. That was a statement. Later that afternoon, Brent had a couple buddies over, beers in hand, standing exactly where my property began. I heard him say it. It's basically ours anyway. Been using it since we moved in. Basically ours. That phrase stuck under my skin like a splinter. Basically, as if legal boundaries are vibes. As if confidence rewrites deeds. That night I barely slept. Ceiling fan turning slow circles while I ran scenarios in my head. If I let this go, what happens in 5 years? Does basically turn into paperwork? Does silence become consent? Here's the twist though, Brent wasn't some cartoon villain. He had a reason. A flawed one, but a reason. At a block party a month after he moved in, he joked his lot felt tight for what he paid. Man, you got the good depth back there, he'd said, half laughing. I laughed too. Looking back, I don't think he was joking. In neighborhoods like ours, there's this quiet competition. Who renovated their kitchen, who added a deck, who's boosting resale value. Brent thought in square footage. 10 extra feet wasn't grass to him. It was leverage. And I was the quiet single guy who kept to himself. Maybe he assumed I wouldn't push back. So I stopped being the polite neighbor and started being the patient one. I scheduled a consultation with a real estate attorney, Claire Donnelly. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, didn't waste words. I laid everything out. In this county, she said, structures crossing property lines are a serious zoning issue, especially permanent ones. And if you ignore it long enough, he could attempt adverse possession. There it was. The thing that kept me staring at the ceiling. You don't start with a lawsuit, she said. You start with compliance. File a boundary complaint with the city zoning office. Process. Not revenge. Not drama. I filed the complaint that afternoon. A week later, 2 city inspectors showed up. White municipal truck. They knocked on Brent's door first. I watched from my living room, trying not to look obvious. They spent 30 minutes measuring, taking photos, comparing permits to placement. Later one inspector knocked on my door. We've confirmed the structure crosses the property line and violates setback requirements. He has 30 days to relocate or remove it. After that, fines begin. Routine tone. No emotion. But to me, it felt like the first steady step back toward equilibrium. Brent showed up at my door the same evening he received the notice. This is insane, he said, holding the paper. They're threatening daily fines. You were warned. It's just placement. We can handle it between us. You could sign an easement. There it was. Are you offering to buy that portion of land? I asked. He blinked. No, I'm asking for cooperation. You want permanent use of my property for free. It's a narrow strip. You don't even use it. That's when something inside me clicked into place. This isn't pride, I said quietly. It's boundaries. Day 29 came and went. Nothing moved. Day 31, the fine started. And here's where it got uncomfortable, because I heard the arguments through open windows. Brent and his wife Dana going back and forth. Told you we should have just moved it. He's being unreasonable. It's 5 feet, Brent. 5 feet. Funny how something so small can become so loud. On day 45, a flatbed truck rolled down our street. Private contractor this time. 2 guys with tool belts and no-nonsense faces. They dismantled that shed piece by piece. Screws whining under drills. Roof panels lifted away. The little window came out first, then the door. Concrete saws screamed through the afternoon air, cutting apart the foundation that crossed the line. Dust floated over the fence line like gray snow. Post by post, the fence came down too. By evening, my backyard was open again, wider breathing. It didn't look victorious. It looked quiet. Brent didn't look at me. I walked the line slowly, nudged one of the survey stakes with my shoe. Mine. All of it. Over the next few weeks, Brent avoided me. He had his own survey done, metal stakes sunk deep. A new fence eventually went up precisely along the boundary, measured to the inch. The shed was rebuilt smaller, perfectly within his lot. We never spoke about it again. But the neighborhood did. At the next HOA meeting, there was this thinly veiled speech about community cooperation. A few neighbors shot glances at me. Others nodded subtly. An older guy named Martin caught me by the mailbox later. "You did the right thing," he said. "Doesn't feel great. It's not supposed to. If you let people redraw lines because it's easier, pretty soon you don't own what you think you own." That stuck with me. Here's what surprised me most. It changed how I see boundaries. Not just property lines. Personal ones. I used to think being easygoing was the same as being kind. That letting small things slide kept peace. Sometimes letting things slide just teaches people how far they can push. Brent wasn't evil. He was ambitious. He calculated risk. Assumed I wouldn't challenge it. When challenged, he doubled down. And me? I learned that calm doesn't mean passive. You can be measured and still firm. You can refuse to shout and still refuse to give ground. Now when I stand in my backyard, there's no fence cutting across the wrong place. No shed casting a shadow where it doesn't belong. Just open grass running back to the true line. Quiet. Clear. Mean it. But here's the question that lingers. If Brent had come to me before building anything and said, "Hey, I misjudged my lot. Would you consider selling me a strip?" Would I have? Maybe. If he'd asked instead of assumed, if he'd acknowledged instead of planted chairs like a flag, would this have ended differently? Probably. So I'm curious, if you were in my position, would you have let it go? Signed the easement? Sold the strip? Or done exactly what I did and let the city enforce the line? And if you were Brent, at what point would you have stopped? Drop your thoughts. I read more of them than you'd think. These situations are never as simple as they look from the outside. And if this reminded you of a boundary you had to defend, property, personal, professional, hit like, share your story, and let's talk about where the line really is. Because sometimes the biggest battles don't happen in courtrooms. They happen 10 feet behind your house.